All right, good evening. Welcome back, everyone. Hope your fast was pleasant-ish, not really pleasant. Hope you had an
Mm,
unpleasant but not painful experience.
Meaningful.
Okay, meaningful. That's right, meaningful. Okay. And Daf Yomi for this week is sponsored by Shmuli and Miriam Fuchs, Le'ili Nishma Shmuli's mother, Beli Yentel Bas El Chonon Olav Shalom. She should have, Nisham should have an Aliyah. And
Amen.
we are 16 lines down. We are in the midst of conversation back and forth as to what forms there is. We know that we distinguish between two different types of prohibitions. We had Avodah Zara prohibitions. When something has actually been worshipped, then even maintaining the object that it should just stay in existence is a problem. But then we had another pasuk that told us that making certain forms, like a human face or the angels or the planets, so the pasuk told us that making those forms were problematic. And the reason why we got ourselves started on this is because we saw that Rabbi Gamliel had some forms of the moon that he used to use in order to be able to show people for Rosh Chodesh. And we were wondering how he had that. And we suggested that it really wasn't a problem to make forms of the heavens, but we have since proven that the Pasuk seems to imply that it is. So the last thing that we had is as far as serving, right? You're not allowed to make anything in order to serve it. So the Gemara says, if you're talking about serving them, so then afilu shilshul nami, so then even small worms would be prohibited to make, right? If you, again, the prohibition, there's this prohibition in this pasuk of lo tasun iti, that you're not supposed to make images of that are likenesses that of the servants that Hashem has in Shemayim. So that pasuk is regardless of whether they're served or not. You can't make those images. But if the item is to be served, so then we had to be reminded that if the item is to be served, so then it remains prohibited, it's for sure prohibited. So the Gemara says, inachinami, you're right. If it's going to be served, so then making a shape of any sort, right? Any idol of any type is prohibited. Umiseifa dekra nafka. And the end of the pasuk, right? This idea that you're not allowed to make anything that is going to be used to be worshipped is learned from the end of that pasuk. Ditanya, as we learned in our brisa. Asher ba'aretz, you're not allowed to make any shapes that are on the ground. So that lerabos yomim unaharos harim ugvos. That means you're not allowed to make any imitations of or likenesses of the rivers, or the seas, the mountains, and the valleys. So mitachas lerabos shilshul katan, and below and beneath, right? That is even the lowly worm that is tunneling underground, and you can't even make any likenesses like that in order to be able to serve them. Now, the Gemara wants to know if I see a greatest of mishari, but is making just making it, is that permissible? In other words, let's say you make it, we came to the conclusion that the prohibition really is making it and serving it. But if you're just making it, does that sounds like it's permissible? But is that true? V'hatanya b'unar brisa lo tasun iti lo sasun kidmus shamshei midshamshim lefanai b'marom. You're not allowed to make any likenesses of me, which is in the heavens. Kigon cham ulevana kochavim umazalos. So you're not allowed to. You're not allowed. So therefore, we wanted to say that the reason why Rabbi Gamliel was able to have this moon drawings, these moon images, was because nobody was serving them. And so the Gemara says, but wait a second, just making them is a prohibition, as we learned in this pasuk that says that making them, any of the servants in the Shemayim, is prohibited. So the answer that the Gemara eventually gives is Shani Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Gamliel was different. Why? Da'achirim asulo. He didn't make them. Remember that the prohibition is making it. Having it isn't a problem unless you're going to serve it. So therefore, Rabbi Gamliel, somebody else made it for him. He hired, I guess, a non-Jew who made the images for him, and then he bought them. And that wouldn't seems to be not a problem, I suppose, right? If you've got a model of the solar system, if you buy one that was made by somebody else, doesn't seem to be a problem. V'harav Yehuda da'achirim asulo. But what about the fact that Rabbi Yehuda, that others made this ring? Remember, he had this ring that had this image on it, and he needed to find somebody in order to nullify it. V'amar le l'shmuel Rav Yehuda shinena samei anei didain. He said that you are the wise one. Let's remove the eyes, right? Let's destroy the image. We didn't want to be able to make any of these images on this ring. He didn't, even though he didn't make it, right? It still seems to be that he didn't want to have this form. So the answer is that's different. Hasam bechosmo bolit. He says that was a circumstance where the image was indented. That they used to do is they used to have signet rings that they would used to use to seal their letters with, right? So they'd get some wax, and then they would take their ring and they would stamp the wax, and the image of their ring would come out in the wax. So you had two types of rings. One was sort of like a stamp that was raised, and then if you pushed into the wax, you'd have a depressed image. Also, you could have a relief image, right? That basically it's pushed inwards so that when you push the ring into the wax, it makes the three-dimensional image stick out. The problem with this ring was that it was a ring that was indented, and so therefore using the ring would create three-dimensional images. So that he didn't want to have, right? That's why it wasn't the ring itself wasn't that problematic. It was that by having the ring and using the ring without damaging it in some sort of a way, the ring would make images that were three-dimensional that he could not make. So umishum shoda, and it's because of the concern that he might use it, right? Because he might, right? Because by having it and making these three-dimensional forms, right, that is a concern. Detanya, as we learn in a brisa, tabas shechosma bolet asur lahanicha umuter lachtom ba. If you have a ring where the image is raised and sticking out, so then there's no then you can't keep that ring because of the fact that you might be people might surmise or presume that you're going to worship it because you've got a ring that has a three-dimensional inappropriate image on it. So you can't keep that ring, but making stamps into wax with that ring is fine because the stamps are pushed into the wax, and that's not a problem. But chosma shokeya mutter, if you've got a ring that the signature is indented into the ring, so then the ring is fine because nobody's going to worship the ring because it's not a raised image. But then it's mutter lahanicha, it's fine to keep the ring, but v'aser lachtomba, but you can't sign any document, you can't use the seal because then you're making three-dimensional images. So therefore, in this Rabbi Yehuda's case was a ring that was raised, and therefore he couldn't keep it because people might suspect that he is going to use it to worship. So therefore, that's why. Now, what you're suggesting is that a person, even if he has a raised image, even if a person has a raised image, he shouldn't keep it, even if he's not worshiping it, because he may be suspected of worshiping it. Okay, so if that's the case, v'habei kinishta deshaf v'yosef ben nahardoi de okmi be andarta. So what about the fact that there was the shul that was called Shaf v'Yosef, which means I guess they floated and settled, meaning that they had taken stones from Yerushalayim and they had used the stones from Yerushalayim and brought them out to this Beis HaKnesses in Chutz La'aretz. And so it was sort of like this. The nickname of the shul was the one that floated out of Eretz Yisrael and settled here, right? Like we have in a lot of shuls where they use the Jerusalem stone in order to be able to build it. So they had used stones from Yerushalayim in order to construct it. So that was the shul in Nardoi, and they placed in Andarta, the non-Jews put a statue in the shul, and Vahavu Oili Bay, and people still went to shul there. So why not? Why, I'm sorry, why were they allowed to do that? Shouldn't they have been concerned that even though obviously the people in the shul are not going to worship that idol, you should be concerned having the idol because maybe somebody will worship it. So Avu Shmuel v'Levi u'metzalu l'gaveh, right? The father of Shmuel and Levi, he went in there and he davened there. Even that wasn't like anybody just davened, like this important people. They didn't worry about the fact that people might be concerned and they might worship the idol without I guess they might worship this idol. So the answer is Rabim Shani because that was public, right? In public, people will remind each other not to do the wrong things. So therefore, that's not a problem. But if an individual person found a ring that had the image raised, he shouldn't keep it. He should get rid of it, destroy it. Because he might be suspected of having worshipped it. Okay, so now, V'ha Rabbi Gamliel diyachid hava. How did Rabbi Gamliel have his images then? So, okay, we suggested that somebody else made it for him, but if this is true, he's an individual, and since he's an individual, he had the picture that was raised. Maybe people would suspect him of worshiping them, so he shouldn't be allowed to keep the pictures. So the answer is Kevin Denasi hu shchichi rabim gabe. Answer number one, he's the Nasi. There are lots of people coming to his office. So therefore, he's not a private person, right? Some people, their private lives are public. He was a public individual. So therefore, he didn't have to worry about that. If you want to ask, Diprokim Havai, that if you want, I will answer that it was made in pieces. So therefore, he would put it together. It was disassembled. So therefore, people wouldn't presume that he's worshiping something that is disassembled. He would assemble the pieces when he needed to be able to use the diagram. But otherwise, it was not intact. Or else if you want to say, lehislamed shani, to teach is different, right? If you have the image in order to show people this is what it's like, that's permissible, right? Because then people understand, what do you have it for? Tanya is going to brisa. Lo tamid la'asos, aval atalimed lahavin ulahoros. He says that lo suman lasos, you're not supposed to, the pasuk says in Dvarim, you're not supposed to learn to do the actions of the non-Jews. So the pasuk we derive from there that you're not allowed to learn, the prohibition of learning about idolatry is only to learn what their practices are, because you want to do their practices. However, if you want to study their religion in order so that you can understand it and to be able to teach against it, that's okay, right? So if a person who is, a rabbi wants to fight against, Jews for Jesus or something like that, and wants to read the New Testament in order to be able to know how to answer the non-Jews, that would be permissible because he's doing it for the purpose of he's not doing it for the purpose of understanding it and following the non-Jewish ways. He's doing it for the understanding of not following it. Okay, that ends that. I didn't think we would be able to have enough time to rush through that last time, so we kind of got caught in the middle. So if you didn't remember, but play the end of last year right into this year, and you'll see it all works through fine. Okay, next. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, Ezohi mechubadin vehezu mevuzah. We said that if you had these certain images that were engraved on honorable, according to Rabbi Yossi, if it was on an honorable utensil, so then Rishon Gamliel said, then it was on an honorable utensil, then people might worship it. But if it was on a lowly utensil, then people would not worship it. So what is the definition of an honorable utensil, and what's the definition of a dishonorable utensil? So Rav says the definition is honorable is if the design is above the waterline. Meaning you put water in this pitcher, the top section, which is not for use, it's for decoration. If that section has the decorations on it, that is honorable. Mivuzin l'matim minamayim. And the disgrace part is if it's below the waterline, right? It's just on the regular side of the pitcher, that's nothing. That doesn't mean anything. Shmuel says, Elu v'elu mivuzin hein. On the side of any pitcher is going to be disgraceful. That's not what we mean by honorable. Ela eluhin mechubadim shel hashirin val hanizamim val tbos. If we have it on jewelry, right? If we have these designs that are on nose rings or they're on rings, right? Then that's an honorable utensil, right? But if it's on some kind of water jug, that is going to be a dishonorable utensil. We're talking about the high level, the jewelry items. Tanya Kavasa Shmuel, a brisa that supports what Shmuel says. Mechubadim shal hashirin v'al nizamin v'al tabos. That the definition of an honorable utensil is if it's on the jewelry, if it's on the nose rings, if it's on the rings. Muvuzan shal hayoros v'al ha'kum kamsin v'al machme chamim she'al v'she'al hasadinin v'al hamitpachos. He says, but something that is dishonorable is if it's on pots, if it's on little pitcher, little metal utensils, if it's water urns that they use to heat up hot water on, or on towels, or on tablecloths, those kinds of things. That's not good. Those are the disgraceful utensils, not the serious ones. Okay, so that's our definition. Next Mishnah. Mishnah says, Rabbi Yossi says, when you want to destroy a metal utensil, so what do you do? Shochek v'zorer l'ruach. You can also grind up. We said that you could throw it into the Dead Sea, right? That's what we had said in the last Mishnah. Rabbi Yossi says you could also grind it up and throw it into the wind, right? Throw the dust, the metal dust, into the wind and spread it out. O matil liam, or you could throw it into the sea, right? That would be okay. Amrulo, they said to him, Afu nasa zevel. If you throw it into if you do any of those things, then the metal can become fertilizer, right? It could be good for the crops, and then through that you're getting benefit out of the idolatry. Shenamar, pasuk says, Lo yidbak biyadchem umam min hachirim. You're not allowed to get any. Nothing should be in your possession that comes from the idolatry. So therefore, you shouldn't get any benefit from it at all. So therefore, they disagree. The Chacham disagree and say you cannot just sprinkle it into the wind. Says the Gemara, Tanya Brisa. Amar Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi said back to the Chacham. And this Mishnah continues. This Brisa continues the argument from our Mishnah. And Rabbi Yossi says, "Velo kvar nemar veschatos asher asisem es ha'egel." This is Mem Daled Amud Aleph. Your sin, which you made the golden calf. So what did Moshe do with the golden calf? Lakachti ve'esrofo so ba'esh. I took it and I burned it in fire. Ve'akos oso tochun hetev. I took it and I ground it up really, really well. And then ad asher dak le'afar, until it was fine like dust. Ve'ashlichas afro v'nachal. And then I threw the dust into the stream. Hayori minahar, that was coming down the mountain. So therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu did exactly that. He ground it up and he threw it into the water. So how can you argue with Rabbi Yossi? He's just telling you to do the same thing that Moshe Rabbeinu did. So Amar Lo, so they said to Rabbi Yossi, Misham Raya, that's a proof what Moshe Rabbeinu did. Hari hu omer vayazer al pnei hamayim vayashk as bnei Yisrael. So he sprinkled the dust onto the water, and then he made bnei Yisrael drink from the water. Lo niskalim lebotkan kisotos. Moshe Rabbeinu was making sota water, right? Just like the sota water, where he took the dust from they take the dust from the base of Mikdash and they investigate to see if the woman was adulterous. So Moshe Rabbeinu was testing to see who worshipped the calf and who didn't, and he sprinkled the dust from the calf into the water, and he made Bnei Yisrael drink, and whoever was liable died. So therefore, that was what Moshe Rabbeinu did. That has nothing to do with destroying the idol, which is what our Mishnah is talking about. Amar lehem Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi answers back, V'halok kvar nemar, the pasuk says, V'gam es macha hasira migvira asher asasa vayidak vayisarif benachal kidron. And then Macha, right? She this is second. This is Asa ground up in he was the king of Yehuda, and he ground up all the Avodah Zara that his mother made. And Macha had was removed. She was removed from being in charge, right? Because she made an Asherah tree, a idolatrous tree, miflatzes. We're going to discuss what the word miflatzes means. Thank you so much. So and he threw and then they threw the ashes into the Kidron, into the valley of the Kidron, and they weren't worried about the fact that it would fertilize the crops. Yes, Aaron.
Yeah, I'm just having trouble understanding that idea of burning the golden calf and making the water as a parallel to the
Okay.
soda water. First of all, who told him to do that? First of all, and second, what that's not considered benefiting from Avodah Zara, like it's
Oh,
taking
no,
something.
I would say it would be distinctly to their disadvantage, right? Because if they
Yeah,
did
but
it,
it's almost like giving power to say, okay, so if we burn it and from the water from the mixture, we know that now that you're doing avodah zarah. That means that he's giving a certain power to it.
yeah,
Like it has some power to it, even though it's
you're
counter.
saying they're using it, regardless of it might be for a bad, but you're using it. And the idea of getting
Yeah,
hana for something is that you shouldn't get any hana from it.
yeah,
And it ties back to your first question, which is who told Moshe Rabbeinu to do this in the first place,
yeah.
right? So if we presume that Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu to do it, so then we would
Mm,
presume it's not a challenge, right? I guess we would say, since
mm,
Hashem told him specifically, and maybe that's why it's not a proof here, because the fact that they ground it up that time doesn't prove anything to any other circumstance. Hashem told them to do it. Moshe Rabbeinu was doing something unique, right? If Hashem never told Moshe Rabbeinu to do it, and he figured out this strategy on his own, is
yeah.
he getting is he getting benefit, right? Making the sota water itself is a benefit. It's a good question.
Uh-huh.
That'd be a good question. It
Okay.
would lead me to believe that the answer is the first way that Hashem specific. Although I don't think the pasuk says Hashem said to Moshe, "Grind it up and make people drink it." Right.
Yeah.
So, um,
So you don't see it as giving a certain power to it, like the fact that originally it was Avodah Zarah. Okay, we don't believe in it. We don't see any validity in like it doesn't have any effect in the world, like according to us. So now we're giving it some some power.
so it becomes a question: is how does sota work? Right? How does sota waters work? Is sota waters work in that you're elevating the water and creating something that has power?
Yeah.
Or is there a natural consequence when a person comes in contact with their Avera? It actually happens to be a sort of a strange sort of version of Sota water in any event. If you
But
really
the
start
Sota
to
water
deepen
has
down,
Hashem's name, though.
it has Hashem's name, which means that this Hashem's name comes in contact with the person who did an Avera, and you can see, okay, then those two things don't get along, and that's why the person dies.
Yeah,
Right? This is the Avodah Zara gets inside of the person. So it is difficult to understand. I will give you that.
because it's
I
gonna
don't have
have
good
the
answers.
the Avodah Zarah is gonna tell us whether the person was involved in it or not. You understand?
Correct. Yes,
So
the Avodah Zarah is going to tell, which means that the Avodah Zarah has some kind of power to it.
exactly, yeah, that's what I see, the way I see it.
Yeah, I can understand where you're coming from. I don't have a great answer.
Yeah, okay,
I have to give some good thought to that.
okay.
Everybody else can chip in and see what everybody else thinks of also. Sometimes I'm stumped. That's a good question. Okay. So now we had this other circumstance where they also took. Ellie's looking up. He's grabbing something on the side, see if he finds anything as he's looking up. So, um, that she made this maflitza. She had this idol. They ground it up, and they also threw it into the valley, and they weren't worried about it fertilizing anything. So Amar Lo, so they said back to Rabbi Yossi, Misham Raya, that's not a proof, right? Again, Rabbi Yossi is saying that you don't have to worry about fertilizing it. And the Chachamim say you do have to worry about it fertilizing. So they said that's not a proof. Nachal Kidron, Eino Gadol Tzmachin. They didn't grow anything in the valley of Kidron. The Kidron Valley was barren. Therefore, that they chose that place specifically to sprinkle it because it would have no effect. Nobody would get any benefit from it because they weren't growing anything there. Okay, below. Nobody was growing anything about time where Raisa. Elu ve'elu misarvin ba'ama v'yotin lenacha kidron. What would happen is that they would have blood from the sprinklings that took place inside the Beis Hamikdash. We talked about certain korbanos that were brought inside the Beis Hamikdash, certain korbanos that were brought outside the Beis Hamikdash. The blood would come out of a small channel from the inside of the Beis Hamikdash It would join together in a small channel. We'll get into these discussions. We get into our Zvachim units and we start talking about the Korbanos. But these channels of blood and water, that was basically a water channel that was like a drainage channel that ran through the middle of the Beis Hamikdash, that all the blood would get pushed into and then it would run out. So this water mixed with blood would go out into the Kidron Valley. It would exit the Beis Hamikdash out had a kind of a drainage system that went out into the Kidron Valley. Venim karim liganinin lizavel, and then they would sell this water. They would rent it to the farmers that were in that area in the Kidron Valley, and they would water their crops with it. And it would be great fertilizer. It had lots of organic material that was in there, and it would be very healthy for the crops. And if you use it without paying for it to the Beis Hamikdash, you commit me'ilah, because all of that blood is the property of the Beis Hamikdash, so you can't use it without buying it first. So the answer is mikomos yeshba. There's different places in the Kidron Valley, right? It's not all unique. It's not all the same all over the place. Yesh makom megalat tzmachim, yesh makom she'im megalat tzmachim. Some places in the Kidron Valley they grow things, and some places in the Kidron Valley they don't. So therefore, that doesn't prove Rabbi Yossi's point that you don't have to worry about the fertilizing. So now, on a side note, my miflitza, we said that Macha, right? This is the grandmother of Asad, that she made an Asherah mifletzes. So what is this Asherah tree, this idolatrous tree that's mifletzes? My miflatzta. What is the translation of this word miflatzta? Amar Rabbi Yehuda dehava asala v'aisad niv eles lo bechol yom. That what she did was she was mafli lit. It was I skipped a line. Sorry. My mafli Amar Rabbi Yehuda dehava mafli leitanusa. She would use it for disgraceful purpose. So what did she do? Rav Yosef, so Kibitani Rav Yosef, Rav Yosef explained. She made kimin zachrus ostala. She made sort of a phallic symbol out of the tree. The haisa niv elas below b'chol yom, and she had relations with it every day. So therefore, that was her service to the idolater, to the idol. So that was what mifletzes, the disgrace that she did. That was the mifletzes. Okay, Amar lehen Rabbi Yossi. Now Rabbi Yossi said that back to the conversation. They just threw that in there. Now we go back to the conversation. Rabbi Yossi says, "V'lo nemar v'kites nachash nechoshes," that when Moshe Rabbeinu, when they had a plague going through Bnei Israel, and Moshe Rabbeinu was instructed to make a staff with a snake on it, right? And then everybody would look up to the staff and they would remember Hashem. And so, therefore, they would remember Hashem and they would daven and they would be saved from the plague. Now, the staff in later generations started to get worshipped. People thought that the staff had some kind of power, and therefore it saved people back then. Maybe it could save us now. And so people were worshiping the staff. So what happens is Chizkiyahu decided, time to destroy the staff. And it's an important relic and object for Moshe Rabbeinu, but nevertheless, people are worshiping it, so let's destroy it. So what did he do? So he took it, and he ground it up, and he threw it into the wind. That's what it tells us that he did with it in Malachim. And so the question is, aren't we worried about it fertilizing wherever it lands? And the answer seems not, proves Rabbi Yossi's point. So the answer is, Misham Raya, that's a proof. Harehu Omer, the pasuk says, Vayomer Shem Moshe aseh lecha saraf, lecha mishalcha. So he says, this was not an idol. It couldn't have been an idol. Even if people were worshiping it, it wasn't an idol. Why? Because Hashem says to Moshe, make yourself this staff with a serpent on it. And that means that the staff was made out of material that belonged to Moshe Rabbeinu. It was his staff with the snake on it, not the staff that he does all of the miracles with. But Moshe Rabbeinu made this staff and it belonged to him, which means that this staff was personal property. A person cannot ruin, if somebody goes over to my personal property, let's say I've got a car, and this person decides he's going to worship my car. My car doesn't become Avodah Zara and now I've got to destroy it, right? He doesn't have the ability to destroy my object and make it Avodah Zara. So if this was a personal item that belonged to Moshe Rabbeinu and his heirs, the people couldn't just make it prohibited just by worshiping it. So therefore, if they worshipped it, that doesn't do anything. So therefore, Ve'ena the Moser Davar Sheinu Shelo, a person can't make prohibited something that isn't his. So now, the Hasam Bedinhu de Kesusi who lo habetzarch. There, they didn't need to destroy this item. It wasn't an idol, so there was no need to destroy this idolatry. It wasn't like the mitzvah that we have of destroying all the other idols. Ella came to Chazal de Katol Yisrael Basrei Amad Vikitaso. Rather, Chizkiah saw that since people were worshiping it, in order to prevent them from doing an Aveira, he destroyed it. It wasn't that the item itself became prohibited and he had to destroy it. It was just that he was preventing people from doing the wrong thing. So that's why he ground it up, which means that it really wasn't prohibited as an idol, which means that if it does fertilize the ground, that's not a problem because it's not really idolatry. Amar lehem. So Rabbi Yossi said back to the Chachamim. V'halo kvar nemar, the pasuk says, vayazvu sham es atza vehem, vayisaem David vanashav. So this is David HaMelech, the Plishtim, right? They when he beat them in this place called Baal Pratzim. So the Plishtim, when they ran away, they left their idols. They dropped their idols in order to run away fast. And David HaMelech, right, had them. So what did they do? They ground them up. Vayisaim David v'nashav. He picked them up, or he's going to say Vayisaim means he ground them up, and he spread them into the wind. And so you see, you're allowed to spread the idols into the wind and not worry about whether it's going to fertilize any crops. That's Rabbi Yossi's proof. Umay mashma, the Gemara wants to know, Umay mashma to high Vayisaim David lishna dizeru yehu. Who says the word Vayisa when David literally means to lift it up? Who says that means to spray it, to sprinkle it into the wind, to grind it up and sprinkle it into the wind? Targum Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef was a master of Targum, of Aramaic translations, and he taught as follows: Tizareim l'ruah v'ruach tisaim. That in the pasuk, this is where this pasuk is in Yeshaya, right? You should sprinkle them, and the wind will carry it away. Umitargaminon, and the targum on that pasuk, the translation, the Aramaic translation on that pasuk is Tazrinun v'ruach titalinun, that you should sprinkle it around and the wind will take it. So therefore, you see that the word, which is in that pasuk, v'ruach tisaim, the ruach will lift it up. The word tisa, yisa, to lift up, is sometimes used as the wind will scatter it. So Amru Lo, so they said back to him, Misham Raya, just because David HaMelech ground up these idols, he sprinkled them into the wind, that doesn't mean it's acceptable to do to other idols. That's not a proof. Harehu Omer, the pasuk says, Vayisrafu ba'esh. First, they burned it up in fire, right? They burned it up in fire first. Now that pasuk isn't in the same place. That's not Malachim, that's in Divrei Yamim. It says when David had these idols, he burned them up. So it shows us that David HaMelech didn't just grind them and scatter them into the wind. He burned them up, Vayisaim, and he sprinkled them. Shma mina, Vayisaim mamash. Right? That what he did was, since he was burning them, it means here, it doesn't mean that he sprinkled into the wind. It says that one second.
That thing he said he saw them means literally.
Right, so it means he literally lifted them up and he took them in order to get benefit from them. Vayisaim here doesn't mean that he sprinkled it into the wind. He took them, right, and then he burned them. But then it also says Vayisaim here means he literally lifted them up, thereby taking possession of them and using them. So now Mikol Makom Kashu Kroya Hadadi. So now we have two psukim that are contradictory. One pasuk says that they burned the idols. One pasuk says that he took the idols and he kept them. So which is it that he did? So kashu kroya dadi, the psukim are contradictory. Kid Rav Huna, it's like Rav Huna said to Rav Huna Ramiksiv. Rav Huna contrasted the psukim. Vayomer David, Vayisrafa Be'esh. David commanded, and he burned them in fire. Uksiv, and the other pasuk says, Vayisa'im. They took them and they kept them. So lo kasha, it's not a contradiction. Kan kodem sheba itai hagiti, kan lach sheba itai hagiti. What happens is David had a Shabbos goy. His name was Itai Hagiti. And this goy, before he came along, David was burning the idols because he couldn't get any benefit from them. So he was destroying them. But once Itai Hagiti showed up, then David HaMelech was able to use Itai Hagiti because he could nullify the idolatry and then he could keep it. So that's what happened. But once Itai Hagiti, so therefore, before Itai Hagiti showed up, they were burning it. Then after Itai Hagiti, they kept it. Dichsiv, as the pasuk says, here's an example of what David kept from the idols that he got from the Plishtim. Vaikach es ateres malkom me'al rosho umishakla kikar zahav. David took the crown from Malcolm, which we presume means their king, from his head, and the weight of that crown was a gold silver talent, a golden talent, which is approximately, if I looked it up, 56 pounds. The very heavy crown that he was had. Now, Umi Shari, now we're gonna translate Malcolm is not Malcolm, is Milcom, right? That's how we read it. Because it turns Malcolm, and we're gonna read it as Milcom, which means which is the name of their idol. They had an idol named Milcom. He took the crown from their idol and he used it, he wore it on his head. So now, Umi Shari, how can he keep this crown? Isuri Hananinu. It should be prohibited from getting any benefit as a accessory to Avodah Zara. So Amar Rav Nachman says, Ita Hagiti bo bitla. Ita Hagiti came along, as we said, and he nullified it, hence making the crown permissible. And at that point, David stopped burning and destroying everything because he had Ita Hagiti around, and Ita Hagiti was able to help him out by nullifying it. Now, let's talk about this for a second. Mishkala kikar zahav, hechi matzi manachla. How is David HaMelech going to wear a crown that's 56 pounds? That is a very heavy crown, and he shouldn't have been able to wear that crown. So Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav Yehuda said to Rav, Ru'uya lanuach al rosh David. Doesn't mean that he literally wore it. It meant that it was appropriate for David to wear such a crown, right? David HaMelech was assuming that role, that mantle of leadership, and therefore it was appropriate for him to wear it, even though he did not actually wear it because it would be too heavy. Rabbi Chanina Omar, Rabbi Chanina disagrees. He says, Omar, Evan Sho'eves Haisaba. There was a magnet in the crown, Dehavas Dorala, and it would float. The crown would float above his head. I'm not sure where the other magnet was. If I'm understanding properly, one magnet was probably in the crown and the other one was on his throne so that it would stay put. I don't think that he inserted a magnet in his head and therefore had the repelling magnet that was keeping the crown floating over his head. I think, because even if that was the case, Dad, correct me, the 56 pounds would still go on his head, correct? Yes, because the magnetic force would still push down. So, Father's an engineer, so we'll learn our forces from that. So that would not help us. But if the magnet was in the throne and that was holding the crown up, right, or it was suspending the crown, even if it wasn't attached, because otherwise, why do you need a magnet? You could just screw it into the back of the throne. It means that there was a magnet from the throne to the magnet of the crown, and it would suspend the crown in midair. Okay.
Yeah.
So
that's what our scroll has here. They say Tosafos explained that the magnet was affixed above in the throne, not in the crown itself.
Yes. So that's what he was doing. So Tosafos indeed does say that.
The first magician.
So mirrors and magnets and things. Yes. So that's how he worked. Rabbi Elazar says it literally wasn't 56 pounds. It wasn't that much gold. Evan Yikara Haisabasha Shava Kikarzav. There was a valuable stone that was much lighter that had the value of a gold amount, that amount of gold, 56 pounds of gold. So therefore it was, like the crown jewels of the, the royal crown. So it had that value, but it was a valuable stone instead. Okay, now Next. Zos haisa ki pikudecha natsarti. The pasuk that we're talking about, the pasuk in Tehillim that talks about David HaMelech's crown, and it says, this was to me because because your appointment I have created. So my kamer, what does that pasuk mean? What does David mean in this pasuk? Hachi kamer, this means b'schar pikudecha natzarti zos hayoli le'edos. So this crown, right, that I was wearing became a proof for me that I was appropriate to be the king. That Hashem, since you gave this crown to me, it proved that I was appropriate to be the king. So my Edusa, what was so special? So David HaMelech was wearing a crown. So anybody could have worn a crown. What is that? How does the fact that David HaMelech was able to wear the crown prove anything? So Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi says, Shahaya manicha b'makom tefillin v'holam to. So it was perfectly fit for his head, right? It just turned out that this crown was the exact size. It got to the place where his tefillin was. It was the exact size. V'ha boya nuchi tefillin. Well, if that's the case, how is David wearing tefillin? Right? He's got to wear tefillin, and they used to wear tefillin all day. So if David Melech is supposed to wear tefillin, how is he wearing this crown? So Amar Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak, Malkum Yesh Barosh Roi Laniach Bo Shtei Tefillin. There's enough space on your head to be able to fit two pairs of tefillin, right? Have you ever seen those pictures, right? Your tefillin goes here. You can also put a pair of tefillin here, right? This is all the space to be able to put tefillin. So there's enough space on your head. Not if you have Lubavitch tefillin. The Lubavitch tefillin, Yehuda, they're very large. They take up your whole head. But the other tefillin, if you go to if you go to the Jewish Museum in Eretz Yisrael, right? They show those right. Yehuda's saying I'm right. I'm 100% right? Because the tefillin they used to wear, like we have these nice boxes with they used to wear much smaller tefillin, right? They used to have smaller tefillin.
I had a pair like that.
Right? So
yes.
those tefillin you certainly could have put in multiple places. Therefore, if David Melech's crown reached, I suppose what they're saying is David Melech's crown reached to here, and then the tefillin was in front, so that there was enough space for him to wear the crown and the tefillin. Okay. Fine. Then the pasuk is also other psukim that are talking about this testimony of the crown that David Melech wore. Pasuk says, "Vayotziu es ben hamelech, vayitnu alav es hanezer v'es ha'edus." This is the crowning of Yoash ben Ochazyahu to become the king in Divrei Yamim, and they took the son of the king, who is Yoash, and they put the crown and the testimony upon his head. So the Gemara says, Nezer zuklila. Nezer is the crown, and Edus, what is the testimony? Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav Yehuda, Edus hu lebeis David. This crown was a testimony to the house of David. What is that? How did it work? Shekol haroy lemalchus holam to, v'chol she'ein haroy lemalchus ein holam to. It was like the slipper from what do you call Cinderella, right? Anybody who was appropriate to be the king, the crown fit him. Anybody who wasn't appropriate to be the king, the crown did not fit. So it was a sign that this person was the right person from Beis David to be the king by wearing the crown. Okay, the pasuk says, "V'Adonia ben Chagis misnase lemor ani amoch." Adonia ben Chagis, right? He rebels. This is Adonia, is one of David's sons who rebels against him, and he says, "I'm going to be the king." Amar Rav Yehuda Marav, Rav Yosef Rav, Shem misnase laholmo, right? Velo holam to. He was lifting it. He was trying hard to be able to say that the crown is going to be able to fit him, and the crown did not, in fact, fit him, and so therefore was kind of a proof against him. This is like probably where these fables come from, like where King Arthur, and you start, if I can pull the sword out of the stone, then I must be able to be king, right? If I can wear the crown, and the crown, then it definitely proves that I'm supposed to be the king, and that sort of a thing. Okay, so now the pasuk continues. Vayaslo rechav uproshim b'chamishim ish rotzim lefanav. So what did he do? So Adoniah, in order to try to make himself the king. So what he does is, this is actually after David HaMelech, this is at the very end of David HaMelech's life, and he's challenging Shlomo at this point, right? Shlomo is going to become the king, and he decides, right, while David's still around, but before Shlomo becomes the king, he's going to start asserting himself and his position. And so what he does is he takes chariots and he takes 50 people that are running before him. So what does that mean? He made them. So my ribusaihu. So what was the specialness of these troops that he made? Tana kulam netuli tochul. What he did is he took the spleen. He had all of them, all of these soldiers, they had their spleen removed. And apparently that makes you run fast. So I don't know if that's like an Olympic thing that people do still, but apparently if you have no spleen, right, you gotta, I don't know why. I think I feel like I had a Rebbe that explained that, like, you get a stitch in your side when you got cramps and things. So removing that helps. I don't know whether that's what it is or whether you just lose some extra pounds and you can run faster, but I don't know what it was. But that's what these people had a surgery in order to be able to make themselves faster. Okay.
The article says that they didn't feel any pain in their feet.
In their feet.
Yes.
Okay. So there you go. I'm not sure what spleen has to do with feet.
It says they severed some nerves.
Okay. There you go.
Yeah. Because I think the full sentence here is that they all of them were lacking spleens and having carved out souls.
Yes, they had carved out souls as well. Correct.
The second part to this.
Yes. That's the next part. They also had their soles of their feet carved out. That's the next part, right? And that they had no soles of their feet. They basically had no skin on the bottom of their feet, so they were running on bone, and therefore they had no nerves, and so they had no feeling on the bottom of their feet, which would enable them to be able to run further. Okay, so there you go. Next Mishnah. Mem Dalet Beis. Sha'al Proclus ben Plospus es Rabbi Gamliel ba'Akko. So this fellow, Proclus ben Plospus, asked Rabbi Gamliel in the place called Akko, Shayarochetz b'merchatz shel Aphrodite. They were in the bathhouse of Aphrodite. And they wanted to know. Amar, he said to him, the pasuk says, Lo yidbach biyad chamumah minachem, you're not allowed to get any benefit from idolatry. And yet, here you are. Aphrodite's bathhouse. What are you doing here? How are you allowed to be here? So he says, Amar Lo, he says to him, Ein meshivim b'merchatz. I can't answer you in the bathhouse, right? Can't teach Torah in a bathhouse. Okay. Ukeshayata. So when they left, Amar Lo, he said, Ani lo basi bigvula, he ba'a bigvuli. I didn't come to Aphrodite's bathhouse. They put Aphrodite in my bathhouse. Sounds like a Chuck Norris joke, right? I put Aphrodite in my bathhouse. Aphrodite came in my bathhouse. That was his answer. Okay. Then he also said, second answer, Ein omer nasa merchatz noi l'Aphrodite, el omer nasa Aphrodite noi l'merchatz. He says, they're not making the bathhouse to honor Aphrodite. They put Aphrodite in the bathhouse as a decoration for the bathhouse. So they're not even worshiping, right? This is the bathhouse is the main thing, and Aphrodite is the minor thing. So the bathhouse is a separate thing, a separate entity. So that's the second reason. Davar acher, another answer is if nosin lechamamon harbe iatem nichnos la'ovodos kachavim shalcha aram ubalkeri umashnim b'fanel. If somebody would give you all the money in the world, would you go into your idol and would you be unclothed in front of it? Would you urinate in front of it? Would you do all these things that you do in a bathhouse? Omedes al pi habiv. Right? Then I guess they would have they had the drainage pipe where all the dirty water would come out. And everybody urinates in front of it. So, okay. So this is clearly not a worshipped idol here, right? Lo nemar ella Elohehem. Well, I'm not allowed to go into a place where you're worshiping Aphrodite. Here, you're not worshiping Aphrodite. That's not how you would work. That's not what you should do. So therefore, es shenoi bo mishum eloha, it would only be prohibited if you were treating Aphrodite like a goddess. Then it would be prohibited for me to use it. Es she'eno noig bo, but if there's an idol and you're not treating it respectfully like an idol, so then mishum eloha mutter, then it'd still be mutter. You're still allowed to get benefit, right? It doesn't prohibit the item. Those were his three answers. And the Gemara is going to discuss what is the value of his three answers. Why do we have all three answers? It is 9:31, so probably this is a good place to stop. So we will end
Beautiful.
we'll end here.
Yep.
And pick
Perfect.
up this location tomorrow.
Sounds great. Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much, Rabbi Loiterman.
Have a nice
Thanks.
evening.
Thank
Good
you.
luck.
Go ahead.
Have a good night, gentlemen. Speak to you tomorrow.
Thanks.
Okay, take care.